What if I told you that the legendary monsters said to haunt deep lakes around the world aren't myths at all, but rare, elusive creatures that sleep beneath the silt for years, even decades at a time, emerging only when conditions are just right? From the dark waters of Loch Ness in Scotland to the pristine depths of Lake Champlain in North America, from the mysterious volcanic crater Lake Tianchi in China to the boggy, peat-stained lakes of rural Ireland, sightings have persisted for centuries. Just frequent enough to spark belief, just rare enough to stay unresolved, just consistent enough to make you wonder. Today, we're going to explore a radical but biologically grounded theory that could finally explain these enigmatic encounters. Not supernatural forces, not alien visitors, but a form of aquatic hibernator hidden in the silt for decades at a time. But first, let's examine what we're actually dealing with. From every corner of the world, we hear remarkably similar tales. And I mean remarkably similar. Loch Ness, Scotland. Nessie, seen by hundreds over the decades, filmed, photographed, sonar detected, yet never definitively captured. The creature that launched 1,000 expeditions. Lake Champlain, USA/Canada. Champ, described as having a long serpentine neck, bulky body, and flippers. Native American legends speak of it long before European settlers arrived. Lake Tianchi, China/North Korea. Multiple sightings of large, black, fast-moving aquatic creatures. Even Chinese border guards have filed official reports. Lake Ikeda, Japan. Home of Issy, described as dragon-like with humps breaking the surface. Okanagan Lake, Canada. Ogopogo, so ingrained in local culture, there's a statue of it in the town square. Lake Storsjön, Sweden. Storsjö Oduret, documented sightings going back to the 1600s. And Ireland's inland lakes, where horse eels are said to dwell in peaty, remote waters far from any ocean. Now here's what's fascinating. Despite being thousands of miles apart, separated by different continents, cultures, and centuries, these locations share eerily similar characteristics. Cold, deep lakes with thermoclines. Muddy, organic-rich bottoms with thick silt layers. Sporadic but credible sightings spanning generations. Often, no known large fauna that should explain what's being witnessed. And most intriguingly, sightings that come in waves, then disappear for years. Could there be a single biological survival strategy explaining them all? Before we dismiss this idea, let's look at what nature has already proven possible. In the animal kingdom, extreme hibernation, estivation, and long-term dormancy aren't just common, they're evolutionary masterpieces. The African lungfish. When rivers dry up, it encases itself in a mucus cocoon in dried mud and can survive for up to 4 years without food or water. Its metabolism drops to nearly zero. Wood frogs. They literally freeze solid in winter. Their hearts stop beating, they stop breathing, ice crystals form in their blood, then thaw out in spring completely unharmed. Painted turtles. Can survive underwater for months without breathing, using anaerobic respiration and storing oxygen in their shells. Brine shrimp. Their eggs can remain dormant for decades in dried lake beds, then hatch immediately when water returns. Tardigrades. These microscopic water bears can enter cryptobiosis, a state so deep it's almost death, for over 30 years. But here's where it gets really interesting. Arctic ground squirrels hibernate for 8 months, during which their body temperature drops below freezing. Bears can hibernate for 6 to 7 months without eating, drinking, or eliminating waste. Now imagine scaling this up. What if a much larger, colder, slower creature had evolved an even more extreme version of this strategy? What if it could remain dormant not for months, but for years, even decades? The metabolic mathematics actually work. The larger the animal, the slower its base metabolic rate. A creature the size of a plesiosaur, with the metabolic flexibility of a lungfish, could theoretically survive in dormancy for extraordinary periods. Here's where our theory gets compelling. These sightings don't happen randomly. They come in distinct waves, often triggered by specific environmental disturbances. Loch Ness, the 1930s. Explosion, the most famous surge began in 1933, but few people know why. That year, A new road was built along the north shore of Loch Ness, requiring massive amounts of dynamite blasting and heavy machinery. The construction literally shook the ground for months. On July 22nd, 1933, George Spicer and his wife were driving on the road opposite when they witnessed a large creature crossing in front of their car. This wasn't a water sighting, it was on land. They described it as most extraordinary, with a long neck and bulky body. Within weeks, sightings exploded. Hugh Gray captured the first alleged photograph in November 1933. The famous surgeon's photo appeared in 1934. Construction workers reported strange sounds from the loch at night. Lake Champlain, the pattern repeats. The Sandra Mansi photograph from 1977 remains one of the most compelling pieces of visual evidence in lake monster lore. But what's often overlooked is the broader environmental context surrounding the sighting. While there are no confirmed reports of significant seismic events at Lake Champlain that year, the region lies within a known intraplate seismic zone and does occasionally experience minor tremors. In addition, there were ongoing shoreline developments in parts of the lake during the late 1970s, including reports of dredging for marina expansions and waterfront improvement projects. Though we can't say with certainty that these disturbances occurred at the exact time or location of Mansi's sighting, they mirror a familiar pattern seen in other lakes. Periods of environmental disruption followed by rare, striking sightings. Crucially, she had no financial motive. She didn't even develop the photo for 3 years. Her children and husband were present. The story never changed despite decades of scrutiny. Lake Tianchi. The 2002 incident. Chinese border guards reported seeing a group of large black creatures swimming in formation across the lake. What's remarkable is that Lake Tianchi is a volcanic crater lake at high altitude, an environment that should be nearly sterile. But 2002 was also a year of increased seismic activity around the lake. Minor tremors were recorded throughout the summer months. The Irish connection. In Ireland, horse eel sightings often coincide with peat bog draining operations or unusual weather patterns that affect water levels. Local farmers report that sightings tend to cluster around times when the bog lakes are disturbed by human activity or severe storms. The pattern is consistent. Environmental disturbance precedes sightings. Could such activity wake up something buried deep in the silt? Let's focus on a lesser-known legend that perfectly fits our hibernation theory, the Irish horse eel. Reported in boggy, remote lakes across western and northern Ireland, particularly in counties Donegal, Mayo, and Galway. These aren't coastal sightings. We're talking about inland lakes, often barely accessible by road. The descriptions. Witnesses describe serpentine creatures between 10 to 30 feet long, often with mane-like features around the head and neck, hence horse eel. Some accounts describe it as thick as a barrel, others as more slender but incredibly long. In some remarkable cases, witnesses claimed the creature leapt partially onto land or dragged livestock into the water. Father Alan MacDonald, a priest in County Donegal, reported in 1968 seeing one surface near the shore, describing it as like a giant eel, but with a mane flowing from its head. The environment. These sightings occur in very specific conditions: small, muddy, peaty lakes with acidic water, often inland, far from major rivers or seas, with deep organic silt layers, sometimes 20+ feet of accumulated peat and sediment. Perfect anaerobic conditions for a creature to bury itself and remain dormant. The witnesses. What makes these accounts compelling is the credibility of the witnesses. Many were local farmers, anglers, or clergy with deep familiarity with the land and its natural animals. These weren't tourists hoping for a thrill. They were people who knew every fish, bird, and mammal in their area. Credible local testimony comes from fishing parties on Loch Fada in County Galway. In 1954, several fishermen reported seeing a long-necked creature with 2 humps that nearly capsized their boat, and later that day, a librarian and her friends described spotting what they estimated to be a 30-foot eel with shark-like jaws.
Similar to a shark-shaped mouth. And we did notice the body had all movement in it. and in colour it seemed a kind of a bluey black shade. And it came right up along until suddenly I moved. And when I did, the others jumped as well as I did. So then it suddenly just took fright and went right around a rock, which is still there at the point, if you notice it further, and went down. We could see the movement in the water as it went down. And very quickly again it came up, but it was quite a long distance from us when it did come up. It had moved much quicker going out than it had coming towards us.
And what did you think it was when you saw it this morning?
I had never seen anything like it before in my life. I had seen sharks and seals and a whale, but I had never seen anything like this.
And what did you think it was when you saw it?
I couldn't put a name on it.
These two eminently sensible ladies, Una Moran and Georgina Carberry of Clifton, were describing there something they saw in this lake, Loch Fada in Connemara.
In 1965, Captain Lionel Leslie detonated explosives in the same lake. Afterward, a large dark form burst violently to the surface, leaving the team convinced it was no ordinary animal. Irish bog lakes are perfect for our hibernation theory. The acidic, low-oxygen environment naturally preserves organic matter. That's why we find perfectly preserved bog bodies from thousands of years ago. If a creature could survive in such conditions, it would be the ideal hibernation environment. Cold, stable temperature, minimal disturbance, and rich in organic matter for potential slow feeding. Could the horse eel be Ireland's version of a dormant freshwater leviathan? Let's examine the scientific plausibility of silt hibernation for large aquatic creatures. The silt environment, lake sediment, creates distinct layers over time. The bottom layer is often anaerobic, containing little to no oxygen. This creates perfect conditions for what scientists call suspended animation. In Loch Ness, sonar studies have revealed silt layers up to 2 meters deep. The bottom temperature remains constant at around 42 degrees Fahrenheit or 6 degrees Celsius year-round. No light penetrates. It's essentially a natural cryogenic chamber. Metabolic suppression. Large animals entering hibernation can reduce their metabolic rate by 95% or more. Heart rate drops to just a few beats per minute. Brain activity nearly ceases. Breathing becomes so slow it's almost imperceptible. For an aquatic creature, this could mean remaining motionless for years, requiring minimal oxygen, surviving on stored body fat, maintaining just enough neural activity to monitor environmental changes. The awakening trigger. What could wake such a creature? Several possibilities. Seismic activity. Ground vibrations could penetrate the silt layer. Temperature changes. Unusual weather patterns affecting lake temperature. Chemical changes. Pollution or runoff altering water chemistry. Food availability. Seasonal fish migrations or other food sources. Oxygen fluctuations. Changes in water oxygenation. Biological precedents. The Olm Proteus anguinus is a cave-dwelling salamander that can survive without food for 10 years and has a lifespan of over 100 years. It moves so slowly that scientists initially thought preserved specimens were dead. Green anacondas can remain nearly motionless for months, surfacing only briefly to breathe. Some have been observed staying in the same position for over 6 months. If such abilities exist in smaller creatures, scaling up isn't impossible. It's just unprecedented in our current understanding. If these creatures are real, why haven't we found conclusive evidence? The rarity factor. We're potentially dealing with creatures that surface every few years, maybe decades. Active for brief periods, then disappearing back into the depths. You're not dealing with a population of hundreds, maybe just 1 or 2 per lake. That's rarer than finding a snow leopard, and you can't scan under 800 feet of peat-colored water with standard equipment. The environment. Lake water is often murky from silt and organic matter. Depths can exceed 700 feet in some locations. Thick silt layers hide any remains. Cold water preserves organic matter, but also obscures visibility. Detection challenges. Modern sonar can detect large objects, but silt layers create acoustic shadows. Large rocks or debris can mask biological signatures. Dormant creatures would appear as geological features. Most searches occur when creatures are presumably dormant. The preservation problem. In acidic lake environments, bones dissolve relatively quickly. In Loch Ness, the pH is around 6.5, acidic enough to dissolve calcium carbonate over time. Any remains would break down within decades. Behavioral adaptations. If these creatures exist, they've likely evolved to be extremely cryptic, surfacing primarily at night, avoiding areas with human activity, remaining in deep water when active, possibly territorial, with individuals spread across vast areas. Let's examine the most credible sightings that resist easy explanation. Margaret Munro, Loch Ness, 1934. Munro observed a large creature on the shoreline for several minutes at close range. She described elephantine skin and a long, swan-like neck. The creature was motionless, then slowly moved into the water. What makes this compelling? Clear daylight, extended observation time, detailed description of skin texture, and the creature's behavior suggested it was unfamiliar with the surface environment. The Dinsdale film, 1960, Tim Dinsdale captured 40 seconds of film showing a wake pattern moving across Loch Ness. The Royal Air Force's Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Centre analysed the footage and concluded it showed an animate object approximately 12 to 16 feet long. Sandra Mansi, Lake Champlain, 1977. The photograph shows a clear head and neck protruding from the water. Computer analysis suggests the object was 15 to 20 feet long. Mansi had no financial motive, didn't seek publicity, and her family corroborated the sighting. The Rhines underwater photos, 1975. Dr. Robert Rhines' expedition captured underwater photographs in Loch Ness that appeared to show a flipper-like appendage. While controversial, the images were taken with scientific equipment in controlled conditions. Celtic testimonies. In Ireland, multiple witnesses have independently described similar creatures across different lakes and decades. The consistency of descriptions, like a giant eel with a mane, from people who had no contact with each other, is remarkable. These aren't stories from intoxicated fishermen or attention seekers. These are intelligent, clear-headed witnesses who encountered something that defied their understanding of lake fauna. If our hibernation theory is correct, what exactly are we dealing with? Evolutionary possibilities. Relic plesiosaur, a surviving lineage of marine reptiles that adapted to fresh water and developed extreme hibernation abilities. Giant amphibian, a massive salamander-like creature with lungfish-style estivation capabilities. Evolutionary eel, a gigantic freshwater eel species that developed mammalian-style hibernation. Unknown archetype, something entirely new to science, a creature that has evolved to spend most of its life in dormancy. The hibernation advantage? Such a lifestyle would offer several survival benefits: avoiding harsh winters, conserving energy during food scarcity, reducing predation risk, minimizing human contact, extending lifespan dramatically. Population dynamics. These creatures would likely be extremely long-lived, possibly centuries, slow to reproduce, highly territorial, adapted to specific lake ecosystems, possibly the last of their kind. The world still holds secrets. We've explored less than 5% of our ocean floors and mapped the surface of Mars more completely than the bottoms of our deepest lakes. And maybe, just maybe, something ancient, rare, and mysterious still sleeps beneath the silt. In Ireland, in Scotland, in the Americas, in Asia, waiting for the right moment to rise. These creatures, if they exist, represent something extraordinary, living links to our planet's distant past, masters of survival, and perhaps the last of their kind. Whether the hibernation theory proves correct or not, the mystery continues. And sometimes, the most profound truths are found not in what we've discovered, but in what we haven't yet found. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the depths. If you enjoyed this exploration of cryptozoology through a scientific lens, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe for more deep dives into unexplained phenomena, and comment below. Have you or someone you know ever seen something unexplainable in a lake? What do you think about the hibernation theory? Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, there are still mysteries out there waiting to be solved.